This video is the fourth and final installment of our OPC UA series. It includes a live demonstration of connecting the OPC data logger to OmniServer using OPC UA with encryption and authentication.
Last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate a connection to a remote OmniServer with OPC UA on that same machine. This time I'm going to make a connection using both encryption and user authentication, which requires me to specify a username and a password that correspond to a configured user that I have in my OmniServer UA settings. Again, for time purposes, I've already imported my OmniServer certificate into the data logger and my data logger certificate into the OmniServer on the remote machine. Also, I've already configured my user credentials in OmniServer. I am going to go ahead and show you where the OmniServer certificate settings and user authentication can be accessed here on my local OmniServer. Since the OmniServer certificate import was identical to what I just showed you with Top Server in Data Logger, I'm just going to move on to the OmniServer settings. So I bring up my OmniServer configuration. I'm just going to expand that. I want to go to the Client section and double-click on my OPC UA to open those properties. I want to open the properties of my endpoint, as you can see configured here. So I'm going to double-click on that. And take note that the default TCP port used for OmniServer is 27730. And since I use the defaults for on my remote machine also, then that's the port I'm going to use in my data logger configuration. And the host name, again, since it's on the same machine, is going to be that www.client1 that I've used for the other examples. Now, the next thing that I did in my OmniServer was load the OPC data logger certificate. So if you go to Client Certificates, again, there's that familiar import button. That allowed me on that remote machine to browse to my OPC data logger certificate that I copied over and import that. And once that was done, my OPC data logger shows up in the trusted list. To export the OmniServer certificate that I imported into my data logger, I went to the Certificate tab for my endpoint and clicked the Export button there. And again, that gave us those similar options to specify a name and a location to save that file to. And then I go to that location, copy that file, copied that file back to my data logger machine and imported that. Go ahead and click Cancel there. And the security section, again, that allows us to specify what security levels an OPC UA client can use to connect to this particular endpoint from my OmniServer. Now, another important thing that we haven't really discussed is, notice you have the ability to add multiple endpoints. So, I mean, if there are particular UA clients on maybe machines that are less secure, things of that nature, then you can use different endpoints for specific UA clients if you wish, and specify varying different levels of security and user authentication as you choose. And again, we're going to use user authentication for this particular connection. So in my OmniServer, on the remote machine, I went to my Authentication tab, Enabled Require User Authentication, which means that a UA client is going to have to specify a username and a password to be able to connect to an OmniServer. And you basically just add a user, you give a username and then a password, confirm that password, and then at that point, as long as this is enabled, any UA client is going to have to specify that username and password, and you can have multiple usernames and password for convenience. At this point, my remote OmniServer does have a username and password defined, which I'm going to use, and you'll see that when I'm configuring my data logger. And with all that set on my remote OmniServer, I'm just going to go back to my data logger. This brings up our project wizard again. Next, and I'm going to call this one OmniServer. I'm just going to call this one OmniServer project. Proceed, do a new UA data collector. And I'm just going to call this one OmniServer _ UA. And now I need to configure my endpoint. So I'm going to do opc.tcp:// my familiar www client hostname 1 : and then that port number of Click my refresh button. And I'm just going to use the highest level of encryption that's supported. I'm going to enable my authentication. And I have my username here, which I called data logger, and then a password of UA. And you can make these usernames as long or elaborate or as complicated as you wish, which is only going to increase the security of using your user authentication. So that's fully configurable and up to you when you're configuring those settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and click next and finish my data collector. Again, I want to add the items that I'm going to log here for my UA simulator on the remote OmniServer. I'm just going to give this a name of OmniServer UA tags for my UA group. I'm going to do subscription base reads at 250 milliseconds again. I want to manually select my items, add, browse for items to add, expand my endpoint, expand my OmniServer, and I have a topic called UA_sim in my OmniServer that has some simulated data that I'm going to access for this demonstration. I'm going to do a Boolean, a float, and an integer. Click OK, and those items get added to my group. I'm finished with my group. Again, we're going to do our data storage. We're logging to a text file. I'm just going to call that OmniServer UA text. Tell it how to format my data again. Do a simple table mode. Call it OmniServer UA table. And here's the format that my OmniServer data is going to be logged. Change my file name again for the text file. And I'm just going to call that OmniServer UA data.csv. Shared mode. And I'm finished with my configuration here. Again, we're just going to go ahead and start the runtime. I'm just going to call this OmniServer UA config. And it's opened my CSV file for OmniServer, so I know that I am currently logging to from my OmniServer to my text file. Just going to go in here and open that CSV, read only, and there's the data from our remote OmniServer being logged to my text file on the local machine with no DCOM configuration whatsoever. To make that happen. And this OmniServer connection is fully encrypted, user authenticated, so it's very, very safe and secure transfer. So as you can see, I mean, it's pretty much fully configurable. You can have various different levels of security depending on your situation and your implementation, how secure your network is and how secure you need that data to be. OPC UA is a powerful new means of doing these secure connections for your process data from remote machines. And essentially, I mean, it's so much easier than having to go to both machines, do DCOM configuration, reboot your machine to apply those settings, and hope that they work. Sometimes, if you're in work groups, this makes it a lot easier than you would see with DCOM. Now, if you need any further testament to how effective OPC UA is, just know that for the connections I've been making in today's demo, I'm on a VPN connection from my office in Colorado to my OPC servers that are on a PC in our office in North Carolina. So I've made all of these connections remotely from Colorado to North Carolina. And you see how easy that was.
This concludes our demonstration of using OPC UA encryption and authentication with the OPC Data Logger and OmniServer. As always, our support team is available to help you every step of the way. If you find you have questions or need any assistance, please do not hesitate to contact us.